all my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle paid the price. Want a slice, got to roll dice, that's why all my life, I've been grinding all my life.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Ball with AE8. Today's guest is a true legend in the Quincy sports scene, a Sacramento native and proud graduate of University of Missouri School of Journalism. He's spent over 30 years covering local athletes with unmatched energy and dedication. From his long run as sports director at KHUA to his new role leading Muddy River Sports, his passion for storytelling and high school sports have never faded. He's a Hall of Fame media figure, a pioneer in online sports coverage, and the voice behind the famous Duerrisms and Monday Night Lights show. Please welcome the legendary Chris Duerr.
Wow, that's an awful lot to live up to. Thank you for the very kind interview and introduction there, Ashton.
Of course. You know, and it's funny that I said this when I was going through all this stuff and like making notes and, you know, sitting there talking to my dad and stuff, you know, coming up from the Payson scene and, you know, not having many opportunities to show up, you know, freshman year. I did start, but, you know, I had a lot of key guys. We had, like, Ben Perrine, Tyler Barker. We had all those guys, but you still came up to me. I'll never forget this. I was actually just telling my dad this morning. It was my sophomore year, had the worst baseball season of my life. We were at Brown County playing West Central. I think you understand. It was a rough game. But after the game, you walked up to me and you told me that you did great. And that to me, I get emotional by this stuff because, you know, coming off a bad season and having a guy like you come up to me and tell me, you know, you're doing great, stick with it. It really stuck out to me, and I think that's why I'm doing this to this day. You and Chuck both, you've really stood out to me.
Well, that's an incredible honor. You know, this whole business is about connections,
right? Making
connections with people because this isn't ESPN.
Right.
We're not disconnected from the community writ large. We're here. We live here. You know, I got as good a chance at running into you at one of the local grocery stores,
like we do.
Which we do. You know, so if you live here, you invest in the people who are here, and you know, I think you know stories like that are what make this job fun. That you can offer a little encouragement. We're all sports fans. I know there are great divides in our community over rivalries in different communities, but I think we're all rooting for the same thing in the end, and that's for, you know, the best for our young people. Whatever it is your dream happens to be, we want to see you achieve that, and that's, I think, the goal of a really tight-knit, wonderful community, and we're blessed to have that, and so I'm honored I could offer you a little encouragement at a time where things weren't going well. Obviously, you pulled it back together, my man, which is certainly a nice tribute to you and the career that you had in high school and whatever comes next here now in this newest phase and evolution of your career.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. The first question I have for you, we're going to jump right into it because you've had a heck of a long career. So what was your favorite team that you have covered through this long journey of the tri-state area?
That's a really difficult question because there's been an awful lot of fun. I think one of the things that sticks out to me when you start talking about these things is you're lucky enough to see history. And when I started in this business, I was kind of fortunate. I watched a bunch of teams when I got here in 1995 instantly win state championships, and you think that's going to happen every year.
Yes.
And you realize how rare and special a part of that journey is and how very blessed you are to be a part of that journey as the storyteller along the way. So I think, you know, over the course of 30 years, one of the things that I've really kind of taken inventory is like all of the things I thought I would never see. I saw Hannibal football play in a state championship game. I saw Keokuk win a state football championship, which, you know, given some of the meager history of Keokuk prior to that, in the James Vandenberg era up there, would have never seemed possible.
Right.
You know, some of these impossible dreams and some of these communities that really have lit up when their teams were really good. And one of the neat things about the tri-states, Ashton, is that we're all, you know, everybody's kind of known for something. Every little small community has something they do well, and it's a point of pride. So, you know, I don't know that I have a particular favorite. There'll be moments I never forget. I mean, I was sitting there and the ball landed next to me when Billy Heisler hit the shot. And, back in 1997 when Warsaw went on its legendary run in Hancock County. So I've been privy to a lot of really wonderful things. I don't know that any of them are more favorite than the next, but I do really enjoy the fact that I got a chance to be there and be a part of that history and experience it, not just from a sports standpoint, but from a community standpoint as well.
Right, and the thing I think is really cool about the tri-states, you know, I'm going to talk about Payson a lot here because that's my alum. So, you know, 2017 volleyball team.
Yeah.
Only state title in school history. You know, watching that as a kid and not being able to like record and like, you know, cover them. But from your standpoint, how was that like covering them, knowing that that could be the first school championship ever?
Well, I thought it was super cool, but we had a sense early that could happen,
Right.
which is, it's almost like the building of hope. It's like you're getting to Christmas Day.
Yes.
And you will know better than anybody. I mean, those championships are lucky as much as they are just a reflection of being great. You have to be great, obviously, to get
Yes.
there, but you have to have some luck along the way. And you constantly worry, let's hope there's not an injury. Let's hope
Yes.
there's not a hiccup along the way that, you know, or one bad night somewhere in the postseason. So, you know, in recognition of that, it was so cool to see Payson kind of get its moment
Yes.
in that moment. And, you know, it didn't matter what the sport was. It didn't matter, you know, one of the wonderful things about the Tri-States here is when one of us rises, we all kind of go with.
Come together, yes.
I think you had so many Payson fans from not just Payson, but Adams County rooting
Yes.
for that because it was a first. It was a breakthrough. And I'm sure it pains you to hear me
Yeah.
say this, but I think, you know, there are people in Payson who, well, maybe not in Payson, but when Liberty made their basketball runs, yeah, I mean, there are people that will secretly be rooting behind
Yes.
the scenes for, you know, the county and the community. So I think that's what's really great about it. And you talked about being privy to that. I mean, how different did that make the community of Payson feel in the aftermath? That pride, everybody walks around with a little, you know, a jump in their step
Yes,
because you're from Payson and Payson did it. And that, you know, those moments are priceless, honestly, to be a part of and to witness and to get to see kind of play out on the big stage as they do.
And it was kind of funny, you know, going to school. We actually got school out. So, you know, as a young kid, I'm like, we got school out. Let's go. And
That's
I went,
the best.
Yes. And we went to Illinois State because that was where it was played. Correct?
Yes.
It was so long ago, I don't remember. So we went there. And my dad, Tim Schreg, went and we all went and watched it. I mean, there were all of 1,500 people from Payson were at that game. And that's the thing I love about it is because, you know, like you said, even when Liberty made it, we sat in the math class. I'll never forget it. We had no class that day because we were watching Liberty play.
Right.
And that's what I love about it because, you know, it's really rare, like you said, to make it that far and not have any hiccups along the way.
It is. And, you know, most recently we had that with, Winchester West Central basketball.
Yes.
You know, and it's one of those things where, hey, all of a sudden this has become very real. And,
Yes.
and as you touched on, the energy with each of these, especially when it's been a while or it's never happened before in those stands, as you can attest being there, it's insane. It's kind of a different feeling.
Yes.
Which is, again, I think if you ask me, I really enjoy covering schools that haven't, like, this is their moment, their Cinderella moment in the history of it, probably more than anything. One of my favorite things is to be a part of something that hasn't happened before. And with Payson, that's exactly what it was. So that, again, super cool, and again, a reflection of the great pride that people have in their communities and their kids and their schools around here.
So the second question I have for you is, if you could speak and cover any sport player in history, who would it be?
Oh, wow. You know, I grew up kind of a baseball guy, and my favorite baseball player was George Foster growing up.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Legendary Cincinnati Red from, you know, MVP in 1977, and, you know, up until the steroid era, the last National Leaguer to have hit 50 home runs in a season, until all of those things came to pass. So that was kind of, you know, we all have our heroes growing up. You know, I could do the George Foster batting stance from about the age of 6 on. You know, so I guess just basically from a personal standpoint, I think that would have been incredibly cool.
Right.
And I had spent my entire youth trying to get George Foster's autograph. You know, I grew up in California, so we'd go to Candlestick Park, and every time the Reds and later the Mets were there, I tried my darndest, and I never was able to get an autograph. The best I got, he handed me one of his comic books that he had made a George Foster comic book for some reason. So up until about 5 years ago, I never had that. That was like the holy grail of, and I don't collect sports memorabilia much anymore, but that was the holy grail of my youth. And somebody was, I shared that story on Duerrisms, and Blake Skillman, who was at Pleasant Hill at the time, wonderful guy, was kind enough to actually send me a George Foster autographed baseball.
Really?
So I now
really
have that
cool.
on my desk at home. And so yeah, that would probably be my, you know, from a personal standpoint, we all have our heroes, and he was mine. So
Haven't had David Ortiz signature yet. Met him, but Still looking
See,
for it.
you
Still
understand
looking for it.
that,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
I even have them tattooed on my body. I gotta get it someday.
There you go.
Gotta get it someday. So, next question I got for you. If you can't answer it, it's okay, because
Sure.
I know you've covered a lot of different teams and players.
Sure.
Greatest player you have ever covered?
Wow, that's really hard. I think, there are so many different ways you could divide that
Right.
by male, female, by sport. I mean,
Yes.
I think we all have a working list of, how special some of those, situations were. I can remember, watching Craig Lewis Keokuk when he was getting football scholarship offers from every school in the country. I can remember Mikey Smith down at Van Far when Vandalia won the state championship.
Yep.
And, one of my favorite moments of all time was in the Superfan shootout where Mike Smith dunked over a 6'11" kid named Chaz McFarland from Lovington and nearly broke him in half in our gym. So, I've been lucky enough to see Abby Schreck and,
Yes.
there are just so many over the course of the history of the time that I've covered it. I mean, Aeneas Williams is playing at the University of Notre Dame right now.
I was just going to say that.
So, you kind of, it's kind of weird how, we're a pretty small community.
Yes, yes.
And yet we've had, I've gone to a PGA Tour event where Luke Guthrie was playing.
I'm actually going to have him on the show here in a couple weeks.
That's pretty cool.
Yes.
Dustin Jacoby, who played some
yes.
quarterback on this
Oh,
campus, is, somebody I still consider a friend and somebody, who's obviously fighting at the highest levels of MMA from
Right.
here.
Right.
It's kind of the greatest, one of the greatest volleyball players and one of the greatest dynasties in college, volleyball at Nebraska. Michaela Fecky,
Yes.
was from Holy Trinity High School, a little tiny school just outside of Fort Madison. So, it's kind of weird how lucky we've been with some of the great people who've come from this. It's almost like the ratatouille theory that,
Yes.
not everybody can be a great chef, but a great chef could come from anywhere.
Yes.
It's kind of the same way with athletics.
And it's kind of weird that you say that because, from a young age, I played Aeneas and travel baseball.
Yeah.
And this story, I'm not kidding, this story gets brought up every Thanksgiving from my grandpa because he cannot ever, it's like the only memory he thinks of. We're playing Aeneas on the Mudcats over at Palmyra's softball field. We're like 11U. Aeneas comes up, home run right-handed. Comes back up, home run left-handed. Comes back up, home run right-handed. My dad goes, this kid's either going to be good at baseball, everything he touches is going to be good. He's going to go D1 somewhere, might go pro. So it's kind of funny you say that. I think he's a great athlete. He's going to be amazing.
People forget how good Aeneas was as a baseball
Yes,
player.
he's
And
amazing.
as a track and field guy, obviously, with his speed. But baseball, I still remember him coming out of the pen for Hannibal, throwing bullpen innings for
Yes.
him. And it's like that totally gets forgotten and blurred over
It
now
does,
because
yes.
the football was so great.
Yes. So next question I got for you. If you were to have a podcast with any celebrity, who would it be?
Wow, that's a really good one. Gosh, I love interviewing people. I'm trying to think somebody who'd be interested. Somebody asked me once who I'd really love to interview in sports, and I was always a big boxing guy, so I always wanted to interview Tyson. I always thought Mike Tyson would be because it's just such a fascinating life.
Yes,
and there were so many stages of it, and so. God, I have so many celebrities that I admire and people that I'd want to do, but I guess if it was a sports figure, I think Mike Tyson would be at the top of the list, just because there are so many questions you could ask and so many permutations of his life and what could have been different had things been different. So I'm fascinated by people and people who have complicated stories. Make for some of the best interviews of all time. So, I'm somebody who kind of fashions myself as feeling like I do a pretty good job interviewing people. That would be fun, just to try to dig in deep with people. So he'd be probably be on one of the tops on my list.
Crazy podcast / interview. I mean, that would be literally top of the line. That would.
Well, I just hope you don't make him mad at some point. That would be the
say a wrong question.
Best part of it. Yes.
Yes, that would not be very good. One thing I wish this was at the lower part of my questions, but we're just going to jump right into it.
Sure.
One thing you would tell your younger self, or let me just say this, I'll switch it up. One thing you would tell your younger self / someone like me going up in this field, what would you tell them at like a 18 / 17-year-old stage?
Well, for myself, if I could go back and talk to myself, I think in a single word it would be Rogaine. But for somebody in this business like yourself who wants to get into it, be fearless.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the best advice. You're going to fail. This job, this business requires you to fail. You don't get good at this business until you've failed multiple times. You know, people get afraid in this business because they don't want to be immortalized on YouTube.
Yes.
Like the Boom Goes the Dynamite Kid, or we had Lorchcast that we're famous for at KHQA when I was there. But you know, you're not learning unless you're burning. You know, and you got to burn a little bit. There's a debt to the desk that you have to pay. So, you know, if you can operate in this business without fear, you're going to embarrass yourself, and sometimes it's not going to be your fault. But you accept that as part of the growth process. You know this from baseball.
Yes.
You're going to strike out and you're going to look bad sometimes. But if you learn something from that opportunity, sitting at the plate, and you learn how to see a pitch or figure out how to adjust and make yourself better the next time, that's what it is.
Right.
So that to me is, if you're fearless in the way you attack this job or in life in general, I think you tend to grow and you tend to get good. The other thing is be enthusiastic.
Yes.
I mean, enthusiasm bridges all gaps and all chasms in this world. And, you know, it's not just here. I mean, we knew who the crocodile hunter was because this crazy Aussie was out there grabbing alligators and talking in a way that nobody had ever heard people talk about reptiles before. So, I mean, it's just like enthusiasm sells. So those are the two things I think I would offer. You know, if you're coming up in this business, be fearless and be enthusiastic.
That's what I love. I love about that.
Yeah.
We're going to jump straight to a quick sponsor break. Thank you to River Valley Community Course for sponsoring today's video. We'll be right back on Talking Ball with AE8. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of Talking Ball with AE8. Thank you so much to the following sponsors: Refreshment Services Pepsi, Farm and Home Supply, Round Count Excavation, PSD Underwear, River Valley Community Golf Course, 88 Vintage, Game Day on the Hill, First Light Hunting Gear, and Muddy River Engraving. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to Talk Ball with AE8. We're back here with Chris Duerr once again. The next question I got for you, I was actually job shadowing with Remy at one of your guys' shows, and you and Chuck talked about food. So I'm like, this is going to be a great opportunity to ask you something. Favorite restaurant in Quincy, Illinois?
Wow, that's really hard. When I first moved to town way back in 1995, I tell this story often. I knew I thought I had made a giant mistake because they had this visitor's guide that they put out at the time for people who were new to the community, and under ethnic food they had listed Pizza Hut. And I went, man, this might have been a mistake. But there's now so much great food in Quincy. You have an Indian restaurant that's phenomenal. You have Thai food. You have Korean food. You have farm to table. You have 2 Italian restaurants. You have Mexican food. You have such great options. I think my favorite place in town, just based on the fact that it is so different and kind of unique, is Soul to Soul Bistro, which is the Korean fusion joint in town, which has probably my favorite meal. They have it, I think, twice a year. I know they do it for sure around Chinese New Year, where they do a take on red beans and rice. Which is one of my favorite, old school, Creole type, Cajun meals. But they do it Korean style. They do it with bulgogi, which is like short rib, and it's one of the best meals I've had anywhere. And so, and the meals generally are really good at Soul to Soul, but that's like my absolute favorite. But there's so many great restaurants down in Quincy, and it's been nice. I mean, and my big beef with Quincy has always been that they've not really had great pizza joints in town.
That's very true.
I'm not a big fan of, the pizza, but now the guys at 8 Open have opened Atlas Slice, which I'm very excited to try because they're doing New York style fired pizzas in 3 minutes in a giant oven. So, Chuck and I talk food a lot.
Yes. I love the barbecue places in Quincy. They're fantastic.
They are, and we went from having no barbecue joints to having 3 really good ones in a hurry, and all of them have something different that I like.
Right.
It just kind of depends on what you're in the mood for. So we're pretty fortunate there. You don't have to drive to Kansas City anymore to get great barbecue, or to St. Louis and go down to Pappy's. You can get it right in Quincy, which is very, very cool.
What's your favorite sports memory? I don't know if you ever...
I actually do.
Oh, really?
So I was very fortunate. We used to cover Western Illinois football on the road.
Yeah.
And the year they went to the national quarterfinals, the game that they played was at Colgate, so upstate New York. We flew out on a private charter with the team, and we were the last plane able to land in Syracuse due to the snowstorm of the century. So they played the game, and it snowed 13 inches from the kickoff to the end of the game. And it was the coolest. I'm a California kid.
Yes.
I've seen snow. I've been to snow, but I've never played or covered football in snow like that before.
Cool.
It was a driving blizzard, and it was one of the cleanest and best played games I've ever seen. It came down to the wire. The snow really didn't affect the play, but it affected everything else about the atmosphere. And it was just in that moment, it's like, I am never going to get a chance to cover anything quite like this again.
That sounds
really
cool.
You're in the blizzard of the century. You're playing football, and it was the deepest plunge ever for Western Illinois football at the time into the at the time whatever FCS was being called. I think it was 1AA football at the time is what we were calling it. And it was like one of the coolest experiences ever. So that's probably really high on my list just because it connected so many weird dots that I never thought I'd get to see as part of a game experience.
So what key players were for WIU back then?
Oh gosh, Russ Mickna was the quarterback, and man, probably the best quarterback in the history of that institution.
Right.
And the big rivalry at that time, because there was a pretty good quarterback at Eastern Illinois at the time by the name of Tony Romo. So there was quite the rivalry at the time in state between those two programs. And I do remember watching Tony Romo play at Macomb. They came up and they got beat. I won money off a couple of EIU alums over the course of that. So, but yeah, I mean, Lee Russell was a really good linebacker on that team. Mike O'Brien, who had played high school ball at Aledo, was the nose guard on that team. Don Patterson was the head coach, and Don Patterson was one of the most interesting and classiest people I've ever had a chance to hang around and spend time around. He actually was tight ends coach for the legendary Hayden Fry up at Iowa. Some of the stories Don would tell are some of the best stories you'd ever hear. So that was a pretty unique and fun time to be around Western Illinois football. And I don't know if we'll ever live to see it get back to that level, but there was a time when Western was a national powerhouse, and every year the expectation was go win a national championship. And in tiny Macomb, that played really well.
I bet. Even in Eastern Illinois, that's where my mom's from, Charleston, Illinois. And, growing up, going over there to see my grandparents and stuff, and witnessing that environment was just insane. I actually didn't know Tony Romo went to EIU until like 2018.
Yeah.
It was like in 8th grade, and they told me, I was like, there's no way Tony Romo went to EIU. And then I searched it up, I was like, that's kind of crazy.
It is crazy when you think about it, but I mean, you could tell at the time he was different.
Yes,
I mean, he was a different level quarterback even at that time. And I don't know that I could tell you that I knew he would have the NFL career that he would have based on that. You knew he was a little different than the garden variety quarterbacks you were seeing around 1AA football at the time.
Right. And Jimmy G went there too, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
That's insane.
Yes.
I actually just figured out he was still in the league. I did not know that at all.
It's funny how sometimes you can kind of play out a career long past its career dissipation light. Yes.
Same with Joe Flacco.
Exactly.
What advice would you give? Oh, I already asked that question. How has it been in the transition from KHQA to Muddy River?
It's been really good. A lot of that has to deal with the great people at Muddy River. A lot of that has to deal with, you feel very blessed in some of this, is that I kind of got to witness my own funeral a little bit when I announced that I was leaving the old place, and people were very thankful and appreciative of all we had done. At the time, we didn't announce that we were doing anything yet, so some people knew, but I think a lot of people didn't. So I had retired one day and reemerged the very next day at Muddy River. And, people have been so gracious and great in following and saying nice things and being supportive, which, at 30 years into a job, it's a risk. And I could have probably stayed comfortably at the other place and been miserable and continued to do what I did until the end of my career. But, you roll the dice and you make a risk, and it's turned out to be really fun. And a lot of that has to deal with Chuck, as you well know, and the great people I get to work with, not just Chuck, but, Ben Marth and Don Krim and Steve Eiginger and some legendary names around here in local media. We feel very blessed on a daily basis to be surrounded by great people. So, and Muddy River is kind of captured the zeitgeist a little bit in this community, both news and sports wise, with what we're doing. So it's kind of fun to be on the forefront of something different and new and exciting. Because television is kind of dying.
Out,
It is, and they're starting to make the same mistakes in television that they made in newspaper when newspaper started dying, and that's just the natural evolution of media. Who knows by the time you're doing this what it will look like in terms of what the daily way to gain information is, but there will always be that market for information and that. So, part of it is being adaptable. And after 30 years, I had to be adaptable, which isn't easy when you're an old dog and trying to learn new tricks, but it's also been very gratifying and rewarding. So I'm super appreciative of the chances I've had.
Were you nervous leaving KHK?
I was. I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't.
Right.
Change is hard for all of us. It's just change is change, and it's scary. And there were things that the first week there I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, because I've been doing the same thing for 30 years in this repetitious pattern. So, it gets you out of your comfort zone, that's for sure, which I think is, I'm a firm believer when you stop growing, you start dying.
Yes.
So, that's been good for me. And there are new and fun things that I'm discovering every day still with this. So, but I was nervous. I mean, it's just, I'd be lying to you otherwise if I didn't say so. It's just now feeling much more validated that the choice was the right choice.
Right. So this next one, how does it feel being considered a local legend in the tri-state areas?
So it's funny people ask that. It's like the only time you ever get recognized is when you're, you probably don't want to be recognized, or like, you're making a quick run to the health store for your wife or somebody, and somebody sees you at the, at the counter buying. What's Chris Duerr doing over there with that? So it's like, the whole local celebrity thing is like kind of a weird deal. It's, it's very flattering that people are very nice and will come up and say things or appreciate the coverage you've given their kids or their grandkids or whatever. But, it doesn't really buy you anything. Nobody's confusing me with Brad Pitt around town, sadly, or anything like that. So I guess it's just part of it goes with the territory, for lack of a better word. But I feel very blessed that I live in a community where people are so good to you when you are out in public and say nice things. I catch some heat sometimes, as I probably should, for predictions I've made.
That's media, though.
Yes, that's part of it as well. So it goes with the territory. But again, I wouldn't trade the experience of doing this here for anything in the world. I'm so glad that 30 years ago that I figured out pretty quickly that I wanted to spend my entire career here, and I have no regrets about that part, largely because of the people and the neighbors that I have.
And the thing I love about you is that you don't change on TV, on the podcast, or in person. Like, you're always the same person everywhere you are. Well, and that's what I love.
My wife would tell you that she wished sometimes I would change. But no, sadly, that's kind of who I am. And I think people are smart. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got, I got to work for the legendary Rod Smith down in Jefferson City, who's still doing this and doing it as well as anybody in the business. And he told me people will spot a phony in a moment's notice. He said, if you're not genuine and if you're not who you are, people will see right through you in this business, and you got to be you.
Right.
Because that's the only asset you really have to bring to the table that separates you from anybody else. So, you kind of get what you see here. So, for better or for worse, some days good and some days bad, but I am what I am, I guess.
Right. So, how's it been being a grandpa? I see all the time on Facebook of you with your grandkids and stuff. I love that.
Best job on the planet. That is, and I had great kids, and but you're young, and in the time you're working on your career, and you feel like you're pulled a lot of different directions. I feel like this is kind of the do-over for me. Not that I didn't have a wonderful experience with both of my kids, who turned into incredible people and have been very successful in their own respective careers, but getting to be a grandpa, I get to be focused, and I look forward to that because it's my escape from sports. Sundays I'm pop, and that's all that really matters in the world. And I've got a now 6-year-old grandson and a 1-year-old granddaughter who I was roaming around the Frontenac Mall with yesterday trying to entertain while the girls were shopping yesterday. And it's like, this is heaven. I mean, it really is. People will tell you it's the best job ever. It really is. Now, I will tell you this, Ashton, I thought I was a pretty young grandfather, and energetic. till you start dealing with a 6-year-old and getting on the floor and playing Legos and running around chasing bugs and doing experiments and all the things
Yes.
that we do. I need naps now. I never needed naps before, and sports coverage has never made me this tired. So it is a little humbling, but it is the greatest job in the world.
I can only imagine. So last question I have for you is, coming to Quincy, were you shocked by the amount of sportaholics there are, and how did it feel coming here?
So I started my career in Jefferson City, where football is pretty much king with the Jeff City Jays at the time and Pete Atkins, and I was like, well, this is probably a place where I can start my career and move on to something bigger. And you know, I fell in love with the culture, the fact that it's the only place in America where your social status is revealed in town by where you sit at a high school basketball game, with the Blue Devils, with the Raiders. The culture was such that it was like, I had 3 different opportunities to leave within the first 5 years I was at KHQA. I got offered jobs in bigger markets. Could have had a chance to go to Knoxville, had a chance to go down to Paducah, which would have been a 100-market jump and be the sports director there. And I had all these opportunities, and every time I weighed them against Quincy, it's like, I've got it perfect here.
Right.
If I need 8 minutes to do sports, I can do 8 minutes of sports because people love and understand how important sports is here. So, God moves us places for a reason.
Yes.
I feel like he put me in the perfect place. Now, I had no idea where Quincy, Illinois even was before I started in this business, and now it's like the home that I wanted and never knew that I wanted. And I've been here 3 decades, and God willing, I'll die here. So it's just, it's been very, very special. And again, as I mentioned, it's not just the Quincy thing. It's that everybody has their thing, and every community has its sense of pride. And being somebody who's from California, you appreciate Midwesterners and their kindness and how neighborly people are and how people step up to help one another. And that, I go home and see my parents in Sacramento, and it's nice to go see a Kings game. It's nice to be home. It's nice to eat some of your favorite places, but it's so great to get back.
Yeah.
And I think that's the ultimate selling point of this place. People who grow up here, people who live here, I think take it for granted because they haven't been other places. I've been other places. I don't want to be anywhere but here.
And Quincy's amazing for that. I love how much, like, if you're not playing a sport, what are you doing? Like, what I mean? Like, this tri-state area is just all known for sports, and I absolutely love it for that reason.
It is, but also we've got, there are great drama and musical programs for people who want to do that. There's a niche for everybody here, which is also very cool, which I'm appreciative of as well.
Right. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of Talking Ball with AE8. Thank you so much for Chris Duerr for coming out and being on today's episode and talking ball with us. Got one more thing for you.
You got it.
Tell the people what you've been up to and where they can find you.
Again, we're at Muddy River Sports right now. We're trying our world domination conquest as we speak. You can find me online on Twitter, on Facebook. You can find Muddy River Sports online at Twitter, Facebook. Anywhere you go for the socials, we're there. So, and the website, every single day we're updating it, and we're working our tails off to try to deliver the Tri-State's most unique and most comprehensive sports coverage.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, once again.
Pleasure was mine, Ashton.
And thank you guys for watching. You guys can check us out on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, any social media site on Talking Ball with AE8. Also, you can find my socials, AshtonErtz8, on any social media platform. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. See you next week.